Welcome to the Alignment Yoga blog. We'll be talking a bit more today about pre-yoga. From some of our previous blogs, you may remember that we spoke of pre-yoga as those techniques that get us ready to do the classic yoga postures. Yoga comes from India, and it comes from a long time ago in India, when very few people wore shoes and very few people sat in chairs. And that's an important point to keep in mind. If you've never worn shoes and never sat in a chair, your pelvis and your core postural support muscles are going to be much healthier, much stronger than those of us who grew up wearing shoes, who grew up sitting in chairs. So the pre-yoga exercises, in a sense, are leveling the playing field between the bodies that most of us live with currently and the bodies of the people who originated the yoga hundreds, if not thousands of years ago. One of my favorite pre-yoga exercises is gravity juice. And gravity juice is a technique we use working with the feet, and the idea is through the feet to gain access to have a better understanding of how to work from the pelvis. Initiating our movements, moving our body from the strength of the pelvis, is healthy human motion. And whether you're an athlete, or whether you're a gardener, whether you're an office worker, or you just want to do your yoga postures with more ease, making the movements from the pelvis is going to be a much more easeful way to be in your body than initiating the movements from the head, initiating your movements from your chest, initiating the movements from even your arms. So movements that come from the pelvis, it's very easy on the lower back and the neck. Movements initiated from higher up in the kinetic chain, shoulders, neck, arms, in general is going to put more strain on both the lower back and the neck. So our pre-yoga exercises involving the gravity juice is about using just a dab of oil on the sole of the foot and then rubbing that oil firmly through the sole of the foot. And over the years I've developed some specific ways to work with the oil on the feet that deliver a better, stronger benefit for the yoga poses that come a little bit later on. So please join me as we explore the sole of the foot and the gravity juice as we draw your attention to the sole of the foot. So we start with about a quarter teaspoon of gravity juice on the sole of the foot. And using your thumbs, working that gravity juice all the way around the sole of the foot, around the ball of the foot, and around the toes themselves. So as you can probably see, the movements are fairly firm, and in general, they're fairly broad, fairly long strokes. So gravity juice, people oftentimes ask me, what's in gravity juice? Gravity juice is 99.9% raw sesame oil. So if you don't have access to gravity juice, raw sesame oil is going to do the trick virtually as well. Gravity juice has some essential oils mixed in that are about calming and they're about grounding. And as we've discussed in previous blogs, grounding is one of the really elusive characteristics for so many of us in the West. From Ayurveda, we know that sesame oil is known as the most grounding of all the oils, and it's why we use sesame oil in this particular exercise here. So I'm working the oil all the way around the sole of the foot, around the side edge of the heels, around the heel itself, the ball of the foot, the arch of the foot. It's not uncommon that people enjoy spending sometimes 3, 4, 5 minutes here softening up the sole of the foot. We don't often realize how much tension is in the sole of the foot until we start massaging the sole of the foot. So once you work the oil all the way around the sole of the foot, the next step is to come directly to the toes. So we grab 2 adjacent toes, and then we're going to take those toes and wrap them around each other. So I'll sometimes refer to this as whirligig of the toes. So if we study the anatomy, we see that the bones of the toes don't start right out here, that the bones of the toes really start way back, almost at the arch of the foot itself. And so as we take the 2 adjacent toes and wrap them around each other, catching the toes very low down so you can start to interact with those metatarsal bones a little bit deeper in the arch of the foot. So working through each of the sets of toes, freeing up the front of the foot. For a lot of us, the front of the foot has become quite rigid. We've been wearing shoes for so long, the foot has become fairly rigid. This technique here starts to create a bit more pliability in the sole of the foot, especially in the forefoot. We can consider the foot as our primary shock absorber. So if we step on something, an irregular surface, the foot absorbs the irregularity If the foot's very stiff and rigid, then it transmits that shock higher up into the system. So that may be the cause of knee strain, could be the cause of having an unstable sacroiliac joint. Getting a bit more pliability in the sole of the foot can be a very powerful technique to resolve both knee problems and resolve SI joint problems in the lower back. So once you've gone through and whirligigged all the sets of the toes, then coming back in some nice long strokes, creating a sense of completion for that particular portion of the exercise. Then the next step I like to call cleaning out the gutters. And so we'll notice that the toe bones, that there's some flesh right between those metatarsal bones. And so what I do is I take the fingertips, and it's a firm pressure, and then I slide those fingertips toward the toes themselves. So each set of gutters, and you'll see that there's 1, 2, 3, 4 sets of gutters, somewhere between 4, 6, maybe even as many 8 passes, cleaning out the gutters. So this is the first gutter. I've cleaned it out about 3, 4 times now. And then a couple more passes. And then I move to the next gutter. And a few passes there. So if you're finding that your contact of your fingers on the top of your foot, there's not a whole lot of glide there, feel free to put a little oil on the top of the foot as well. And then moving on to the third gutter. So in the reflexology charts, the study of how the sole of the foot relates to the rest of the body, it's oftentimes pointed out that the top of the foot, this part of the foot, relates to the upper back right between the shoulder blades. And how many students I encounter, they walk in the classroom complaining about how stiff and tight they are between the shoulder blades. And I found quite often that releasing this particular part of the foot, cleaning out the gutters, oftentimes starts to release those tight, stiff muscles between the shoulder blades. So once you've gone through and cleaned out each of the 4 sets of gutters, then we come back to our first technique, nice long strokes, creating a sense of closure, a sense of completion for working that foot. Then the last step is to take your paper towel and remove any of the excess oil. And that's the legal staff is very interested. We give that warning. You don't want anyone getting up with oily feet and slipping and falling down. So you want to make sure that you dab all the excess oil off. So if you've never done this before, what can be interesting now is then to stand up on your feet and feel the difference from the left side to the right side. And people are often shocked how different the feet feel on the floor. And then if you check in, people often will find, well, the hip on that side feels different, the shoulder on that side feels different. And sometimes people even notice, wow, my jaw on one side is really relaxed and the other side's really tense by comparison. So we see that the sole of the foot relates to the whole rest of the body. And if the sole of the foot is rigid and wooden, it's going to take a lot of standing poses to loosen everything else up. If you start with the feet and get a degree of pliability in the feet, then you're ready to start deriving maximum benefit from all the other poses. So we could do 30, 40 minutes of standing poses and get the same benefit as 3 or 4 minutes with the sole of the foot. Value added would be to start with the soles of the feet, get them loosened and softened. Then come up and do your standing poses, and then whatever poses you're going to practice in the balance of your session, going to enhance the benefit significantly. So I hope you get a chance to try using the gravity juice on the soles of the feet. If you have any observations or any comments, please comment on the blog and let us know about your practice and how these techniques are working for you. Thanks for joining us, and please keep an eye on the blog for future installments. Namaste.